Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Derrick Broze, and you're listening to the Conscious Resistance Live. Thanks for tuning in to the Conscious Resistance Network, your home for everything related to theconsciousresistance.com. Our team there, music videos, weekly content, including vlogs, essays, articles, podcasts from myself and a team of others. Thank you guys for supporting us. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can follow us on Facebook at the Conscious Resistance Network. Follow us on Twitter at the Conscious RN. You can find me on Twitter at DBrosLiveFree. And of course, we're on YouTube at youtube.com/consciousresistance. And of course, everything is always posted first and directly to theconsciousresistance.com. Every week I like to cover the most important of my top stories. I write for the Anti-Media, Mint Press News, Truth in Media every single week. Issues ranging from surveillance to indigenous rights to general oppression to solutions, all kinds of different things. Interviews with important people, people doing powerful things, and bring that to you as well as the latest from our team. So before we dive into the news, let's see what's happening at theconsciousresistance.com. I just posted a new weekly content wrap-up. I generally post my content every Sunday that I wrote for the past week. It's been a couple of weeks since I did that, so this week's has the last 2 weeks included in there. Check that out if you want to see what I've been focusing on, some of which you will hear about today. Then we just had a post from Katie Chaos called Watch the Debates or What? Discussing the Democratic and Republican presidential debates, whether or not you give a shit about them, and what you might do with your time that could be more useful. Kayla Moon recently posted Top 10 Reasons Why Humanity Needs to Wake the Fuck Up, a video explaining why she feels that way, and she sources her 10 reasons, and you can debate with her, disagree on that. Check it out either way. She's a newer contributor. We're always looking for new contributors, by the way, if you want to add your videos, essays, articles, what have you. Our contributor Raul just posted The Return of Nihilism. Thank you for posting this. It's a really awesome essay. He always does great work. And just on how this nihilistic mentality and attitude and the philosophy, or lack of philosophy behind it, is a precursor to tyranny, to despotism in nations, and this is what we see happening in the United States and in the Western world in general. Check that one out. Danilo, aka Peaceful Anarchism, recently interviewed Dave Painter, voluntarist, abolitionist, and co-founder of Seeds of Liberty podcast. Check that out. Danilo's interviews are always really interesting, and he has great guests. And I want to say, I like that Dave Painter here, he calls himself an abolitionist. I haven't checked out the interview, so I'm not really sure where he's getting that from. But that is definitely something that myself and John Vibes, my writing partner and co-author of the Conscious Resistance trilogy, have been discussing. And I'll tell you a bit about that in a little bit, why we've been discussing the idea of rebranding ourselves abolitionists rather than maybe anarchists or anything else. So stay tuned for more on that. And recently I also posted an interview from Rob Greenfield, who is a sustainable adventurer on the path to happiness, health, and freedom. Check him out. He's traveled the world on a bamboo bicycle. He's traveled to other countries with no money or very little money. He's gone a year without showering, and all of this, with sustainability on the mind and trying to bring awareness to people in general. And just check out his viewpoints and see also why he got a vasectomy when he was 25 years old. Pretty interesting stuff. And recently, Neil posted the New Libertarian Manifesto, which is, of course, from Samuel Edward Konkin III, the creator of the idea of agorism that many of us here at the team are fond of. So check that book out if you've never have before. And going even further back, one of our contributors from the website 99, Rihanna, she posted a review of a show in New Jersey artist Eve Kim on the rise after Philly artist show. So check that one out. And even further back, I interviewed Ben Swan. We talked about the creation and funding of ISIS. Check that if you have not. And you can go further back that and see what other content we have there. And I do want to remind you, if you scroll on down to the bottom of the website, you can check out the newsletter, put your email in there and subscribe. I send out weekly newsletters every Sunday with exclusive news and content that you hear first by being subscribed to our newsletter before Facebook, before anywhere else you will hear about it, including some upcoming speaking appearances. And on that, I'd like to mention one or two things. I'm going to be speaking at the Texas Libertarian Party convention, state convention in April, I believe. Which, I'm not a voting man. You guys know this if you've listened to me for a while. I'm not a voting man, and I'm definitely not going to be telling people to vote for the Libertarian Party. But they reached out to me and they invited me to discuss that. So I'm going to do that. I figure I asked Facebook, I asked my friends, hey, is this a violation of my principles, or is there anything weird or bad about this? Should I forego speaking at the Texas State Libertarian Party convention? And everybody was like, no, any opportunity you get to speak to people, you should take it. If you're going to spread the truth, then take the opportunity anywhere you can. And I can't really say that I disagree. So I will be speaking at that in April, as well as the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia, as part of an agorist panel featuring John Vibes and several other people. And you'll hear more about that as it gets closer. But one other announcement I want to share with you, I posted this on the website a couple weeks ago, but I'd like to share it with you in audio/video version. Myself and John Vibes, we're going to be releasing a new book this April at the Free Your Mind Conference 4 in Philadelphia. We did this last year. We released The Conscious Resistance, Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality, which you can find here at theconsciousresistance.com/book. And that book has been very well received and well downloaded. We continue to get praise for the ideas presented in that book. And I'm very happy. We've updated a couple times. And yeah, overall, I'm happy with that book as a starting point. Definitely have more to say. So recently, John and I, we realized that the philosophy and the ideas behind the conscious resistance, we need to elaborate upon them even further. And we feel like the first book is sort of the body of the entire philosophy that we believe, anarchism and spirituality coming together. And we laid the foundation. Now we want to show you the deeper levels of this type of thinking that we have. So we have decided we're going to make the Conscious Resistance a trilogy of books. The next one that we're working on is called Finding Freedom in an Age of Confusion. And we thought about it this way, that if the first book is the body of the philosophy, then this one will be the heart or the human side of the philosophy, the human struggle for freedom. This is the way John described it. Being an activist, especially an anarchist one, can be a difficult road sometimes. But the righteous path is never easy. Most of us encounter the same struggles in our path, but these struggles are rarely ever talked about. When someone wakes up and realizes that their society is not free, it can sometimes lead to depression and confusion or alienation from family and friends. This is what happens when the whole world is mad and you are seeing clearly for the first time. This transition can be extremely challenging, and to help make it easier, we are dedicating our next book to tackling these very personal issues that activists experience and to offer solutions to help overcome them. This one will be released, as I said, at the Free Your Mind conference, and there will be a third book which will be serving as the mind of the philosophy, and that one is tentatively called How to Exit the Matrix, because it's going to be very hands-on, whereas the first one kind of opened all these doors and touched on a lot of different topics. The second one's going to be the heart and explain, some more of the personal, how to survive from the emotional standpoint and some spiritual tips and things like that in this crazy mixed up world. The third one is going to be more practical, hands-on, like this is how you exit the matrix and create a free agorist community. So thanks for the support for the first book, and look out for the next one. Now on to the news. I do want to remind you, if you are interested in the topics that we're about to cover, you can always find all of my stories at derrickbroze.contently.com, as you can see up here if you're watching, and if not, you can check the link out below in the description. But that's where I post all of my articles. I try to post the videos as well, and you can keep up with that. Especially because I'm about to shut down my Facebook for a couple of weeks. This is something I do periodically, so I'm not trying to be melodramatic about it. It's healthier for me to have breaks away, and because this is a good time for it, because I'm going to be launching a brand new project at the beginning of the year, January 4th. I'll be back on social media, and that Monday will be releasing this new project, which I am not going to tell you about yet, but stay tuned in the coming weeks for more details on that. So until that time, you can follow my work on derrickbroze.contently, because I will still be writing, I'll still be doing everything I do, and you can find it there. So now let's move on to the topics of the day. I've only got 4 articles that I want to look at, and I think that's good enough for now. I've got a couple other articles that I'm waiting to be released on the anti-media, and maybe I'll give you previews of what those will be, but for now we'll cover these. So this one is a couple of weeks old. It came out in November 24th, and I wrote it about it December 7th, so it's about almost a month old, but it's still worth your time. I don't think I've done a video or talked about this in the podcast, and it's time to do that. A federal appeals court has upheld the Obama administration's secrecy surrounding the controversial targeted assassination program. while much of the media, I'm just going to skip this part, but basically I start this article by saying that, while we've all been paying attention to Paris, San Bernardino, and the escalating conflicts in Iraq and Syria, which are definitely important, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't be paying attention to those. There are other issues at home that we miss. So one of these would be the practice of targeted killings, or the disposition matrix, as it is officially known. And this is the Obama administration's program of assassinating individuals suspected of terrorism. The Washington Post first reported on the disposition matrix in 2012. Quote, over the past 2 years, the Obama administration has been secretly developing a new blueprint for pursuing terrorists, a next-generation targeting list called the disposition matrix. The matrix contains the names of terrorism suspects arrayed against an accounting of the resources being marshaled to track them down, including sealed indictments and clandestine operations. U.S. officials said the database is designed to go beyond existing kill lists, mapping plans for the disposition of suspects beyond the reach of American drones. Although the matrix is a work in progress, the effort to create it reflects a reality setting in among the nation's counterterrorism ranks. The United States' conventional wars are winding down, but the government expects to continue adding names to kill or capture lists for years. So for the last 4 years, New York Times journalist Charlie Savage has fought a legal battle against the Obama administration, seeking to reveal the government's legal justifications for assassinating terror suspects without a trial. Specifically, Savage sued the Obama admin in an attempt to obtain details about the murder of al-Qaeda-affiliated cleric Anwar al-Awlaki. Now, some of you may remember him. He was born in New Mexico, and he eventually found himself on the U.S. government's watch list for suspicion of terrorism. And on September 30, 2011, drones sent by the CIA and the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, flew into Yemen and bombed al-Awlaki and his an al-Qaeda propagandist, Samir Khan. This case drew public criticism not only because al-Awlaki was an American citizen, but several weeks later, after his death, another American drone killed his 16-year-old son. He was also a U.S. citizen living in Yemen. A 2014 ruling by Second Circuit Court forced the release of a memo from the Office of Legal Counsel. The New York Times and the American Civil Liberties Union fought for the release of 11 other memos, but the court protected 10 of them from release. The Times and the ACLU appealed the decision, but a 3-judge panel from the Second Circuit denied the release of the documents, upholding the secrecy. Judge John Newman wrote, "This appeal, like the prior one, primarily concerns whether documents considering such lawfulness must be disclosed." And the ACLU executive director told Courthouse News, "We strongly disagree that these crucial legal memos can lawfully be kept secret. In a democracy, there should be no room for secret law, and the court should not play a role in perpetuating it." The ACLU also stated that the decision would not be the last word in the ACLU's quest for transparency surrounding the government's targeted killing program. So the ACLU is now trying to expose more people to the dangers of this kill list and to continue shining a light on it, but it doesn't seem like we're going to hear anything through official channels. And as I say in this article, there's a real possibility that an American president could use this program on the American soil, to eliminate individuals who have been deemed, quote, terrorists or extremists. And while some of you may scoff at this idea, there are Americans who currently support curbing civil liberties and human rights for groups of people who hold certain religious and even political beliefs. This is all driven by fear, nationalism, and xenophobia, which the media and political pundits are more than happy to exploit. So if the free people, that's me and you, of this land wish to expose the tyrants and psychopaths in the American government, we should start by reducing our reliance on the institutions that we oppose. First, remove ourselves from this crumbling empire and all its machinations. Keep fighting to shine a light into the darkness and expose government secrecy, because as we know, in the end, truth always wins. But this is definitely a dangerous, dangerous weapon here, and this is one of the many legacies of the Obama administration, although he's trying hard before he leaves office to do whatever kind of good he can to erase the memory of Guantanamo, torture, force feeding, NSA spying, drone bombing, NDA, indefinite detention. We can go on and on and on. And not to say that he's any worse or better than any other president. They're all pretty trashy. They just mix it all together and fight for one part or the other. But in the end, as I said, truth will win and the people can stand up. And you better believe that there's going to come a time when we have to stand up to this idea of having people drone bombed, American citizens or not. I mean, we just completely let go of the idea that a person deserves a trial by a jury of their peers. And, I'm an anarchist, so I'm not sitting here arguing in favor of the current system, but I'm saying in any just moral system, there would be some form of, judgment. There would be a fair form of pleading your case, something like maybe what this system was designed to do before it got way too big. We could scale that back, bring it down to a localized, decentralized level, and you could actually have some justice in many of these cases. But right now, this is the federal government, some giant institutions trying to control the citizens, the civilians in the land, and people halfway across the world and say, okay, we've deemed you to be somebody worth killing. So regardless of what your government says or your courts say, or what our courts say. I did another story recently for Mint Press News called They gave this title. I don't really put these titles, guys. Please excuse me if these titles are boring. Bureaucratic hurdles and spotty access to medicinal cannabis gives rise to cannabis refugees. I like the idea of cannabis refugees. Some people say it's disrespectful. I think it makes sense. And this is based off a trip I took. And I know if you've listened to me before, then you've heard me talk about this trip because this was back in October. I took a trip to New York and then to California and drove with Danny Penzel, who's a filmmaker currently making the documentary Does Pot Cure Cancer? Check out doespotcurecancer.com. And traveled with him for 6 days. You can find the interviews from this documentary, from this article, the ones I conducted, on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/consciousresistance, including a mini documentary, a 3-minute mini documentary about my time, and an interview with Howard Wendell, who is the former police officer who now helps cannabis patients get their medicine, that we discuss in this article. But if you want to hear the longer details, this article would be for you. And I hope that you will give it a few minutes of your time because it's about 1,400 words that I wrote. And I'm not going to go too much into it because I want you to discover this for yourself. But I go through the history of cannabis laws, the current state of cannabis decriminalization, and Danny's efforts to research this by traveling across the country. Danny says that when my mother was going through chemo for breast cancer, it became obvious that the chemo was killing her. I started to do research about alternative holistic approaches. I discovered the research about how cannabis treats cancer by accident and was blown away by what had been discovered in the past 30 years that even most doctors aren't aware of. So Danny sets out to go film this documentary and see what he can find out. He's been traveling the United States now for the last couple of years, looking at the experts in cannabis research, including business, medical, the health professionals, the patients, the growers, all the different people involved in this cannabis industry, and finding out what he can. And I went and caught up with him in Southern California. As I said, we went to Mendocino County, what is known as the Emerald Triangle, and we got to meet some awesome people. And this story covers it. I don't want to give too much of it away because it involves a young lady named Aubrey, her dealing with epilepsy, everything that they've had to deal with, and how she has been using CBD oil to treat herself, and has now just reduced her seizures, having an amazing time. And then how Howard Wendell, the former police officer, has just had a change of heart and was really unaware of what he was doing when he was locking people up for their lives, for cannabis. And then we also look at the research behind, the reasons why this research isn't getting funded, the U.S. government's reluctance to do this, while at the same time holding a patent for it. And we look at some doctors, including Dr. Donald Abrams from the University of California in San Francisco, who supports cannabis medicine. He's after all, he's involved at San Francisco's Osher Center for Integrative Medicine, which focuses on complementary and alternative therapies, holistic therapies. He's a medical doctor, but he looks at alternative and integrative therapies. And he supports cannabis, but he doesn't think that it's the cure-all that some people are making it out to be. And in the end, he's just offering, I think, a conservative, as he puts it, a reserved, optimistic but cautious and measured response to interest in cannabis research. He says, one of the biggest heartaches I have is patients coming to see me only to talk about cannabis or cannabis oil as a cancer treatment. He says, if I say I'm going to give you a new chemotherapy for your cancer and it's going to make your hair fall out, you're going to vomit for 3 days and your bone marrow is going to be suppressed, I should have good evidence it works. If I'm going to tell you to eat more blueberries or to get a massage twice a month, how much harm is that going to do? And how much evidence do I need to generate that that's beneficial? I would put cannabis oil somewhere between those two extremes of the spectrum. Even still, he says that 75% of physicians are in favor of medical cannabis, and oncologists, which is his group, he says are the largest at 82%. And he was also involved in a recent study which concluded cannabinoids may be of benefit in the treatment of cancer-related pain, possibly synergistic with opioid analgesics, so along with some opiates. The study also noted cannabinoids have been shown to be of benefit in the treatment of HIV-related peripheral neuropathy, suggesting that they may be worthy of study in patients with other neuropathic symptoms. So, you have to look at this. Why does the U.S. government hold 2 patents for treating cancer with cannabis oil, while at the same time saying it has no medical value, and while locking people up and making people have to save for several years to move out of their home states to go somewhere where they can safely treat themselves with a plant? And we also have to look at this deeper and ask, why do we allow this idea that the government, this giant institution, knows what's best for us and can and should have anything to do with what you put in your body? That's really, where I think it should rest. The government should have nothing to do with what you're putting in your body, victimless crimes like this, what you ingest, how you treat yourself, how you medicate yourself. The government shouldn't be involved in that, plain and simple, and I think most of us can agree on that. So check out that article on MintPressNews.com. Now, these last 2 here are related, and they have to do with the surveillance bill and a Monsanto GMO labeling bill. And the reason that I say they're related, because those topics don't really sound related, is because we just made it past another government shutdown. Did you guys hear this one? Did you guys check this one out? They were saying the government was going to shut down. You might not have noticed. Yeah, I know. It's kind of not frightening at all. Almost like they want you to be in a state of paranoia. This is what I wonder is, do they not see? I mean, the government they know they have a deadline, right? By the end of the year, we must pass a budget, right? That's going to allow us to move into the next year. So how come the last 2 weeks of the year, they start like, oh, God, here it comes. Here's the deadline we've known about the whole year. And we're just going to start worrying about it now and drum up a bunch of panic and get everybody all worried. It's like they didn't see it coming or something. You guys have the same budget every year. And, it's just fear, guys. We just got to recognize that and just kind of laugh at it, right? So they get everybody all worried about government's going to shut down, and definitely there are some people who have jobs that are dependent on these government checks, and people who could be hurt by this, and that's unfortunate. But overall, if the federal government ended, would it really hurt our lives? No, it would probably make them much better. And so they have this government shutdown. They build you up in fear, telling you that if this doesn't pass, the government's going to shut down, and somehow that's bad for you, so you should be afraid of that. And if you don't want the bad things to happen and for the sky to fall and the world to go to shit when the government shuts down, then we must pass this budget bill. And you have to support it no matter what's in it, because we have to do this. Otherwise, the government's going to shut down, right? Yeah, and well, in the end, we may decide to sneak on a couple of things on there because that's what we got to do. But it's for the best, right? That's how things go. We have to think of the collective, think of the whole, right? And so what are these issues that they don't want you paying attention to? There's a bunch of them, and I can only really go over a couple. So the couple that we're going to focus on are going to be surveillance and, as I said, the Monsanto GMO rider thing. And unfortunately, one of them did get through, and that is the surveillance bill. Okay, that's what we're dealing with here. The surveillance bill, masked as a cybersecurity bill, is what I called it. Now I'm trying to pull up the latest article. Sorry, guys. Let me see. I wrote one a couple days, and if you've been paying attention to my work, honestly, you were aware of this before everybody else was, because I told everyone last week with these 2 articles, December 10th, and the bill passed, December 16th. So I told you almost a full week ahead. They're trying to sneak in CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, which is the distant cousin of CISPA and SOPA, bills that they tried to pass back in 2012. This is one of the other things Obama wanted to do. He's been saying for quite some time, I want to pass a cybersecurity bill. They've been, drumming up, we're going to have a cyber 9/11 if we don't do something, yada, 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 right? And, of course, these cybersecurity attacks, these cyber threats are often manufactured, and if not, just unable to prove that the government's saying what the government's saying is accurate, but they are also, the bills themselves aren't going to stop any kind of hacks. They're actually going to increase surveillance. Recently they said the NSA stopped spying on you, right? Yeah, well, in case you bought that, guess what? They're starting again with this new bill. Not that they ever stopped, I'm just saying. But CISA, Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, was originally designed to allow private companies to easily share threat intelligence with government agencies. This intelligence sharing is supposed to be voluntary, but critics say the provisions will only increase the indiscriminate monitoring of legal activity by giving companies immunity from lawsuits for sharing information with the government. So that means you couldn't sue them once you find out that they were giving away your information to the government, even though you're not a terrorist. Senator Rand Paul said that this is going to transform websites into government spies. And it had passed, certain versions of it had passed the Senate, one version had passed the House, and they were trying to rectify it and get into a final version, right? And just last week, a coalition of 19 civil liberties groups sent a letter to President Obama and congressional leaders calling for stricter privacy protections and warning that these protections have been stripped from the bill. So there's all this fight going on about CISA. It doesn't really stand a chance on its own, even though it had passed in some form. It wasn't going to pass and get everything that the Obama administration wants, which is more security, surveillance legislation. And instead, they had to sneak it on to the government shutdown bill. And that's what they did. And Justin Amash and Congressman Thomas Massie said that the spending bill was unconstitutional because it had surveillance measures included in there. They call it the worst anti-privacy vote in Congress since the Patriot Act. And Thomas Massie adding it was completely unrelated legislation to expand warrantless domestic cyber surveillance. The last-minute addition of the Cybersecurity Act of 2015 to a massive congressional spending bill has drawn criticism from representatives who call the provisions unconstitutional. In a statement to Truth and Media on Thursday, Justin Amash said he does not support the bill and sees it as possibly the worst anti-privacy vote since the Patriot Act. A vote for the omnibus vote is to support unconstitutional surveillance on all Americans. It's probably the worst anti-privacy vote since the Patriot Act. And Thomas Massie released a statement on his Facebook page on Wednesday saying, "We learned last night that in addition to unsustainable spending, the giant omnibus includes completely unrelated legislation to expand warrantless domestic cyber surveillance and to repeal country of origin labeling for meat sold in the U.S. I will be voting no on Thursday." The Cybersecurity Act of 2015 brings together provisions from other bills that have been passed in either the House or the Senate, including CISPA and CISA, as I just mentioned. So, yeah, there you go. Cybersecurity/surveillance bill, worst anti-privacy bill since the Patriot Act. That's passed. That is now law. And another one, and this one fortunately did not get in there, but this is another one you should probably be aware of. And this is really, let's remove this next topic, because it has to do with genetically modified foods. Let's remove whatever you think about the science of genetically modified foods and whether or not you think it's good or bad. That's kind of irrelevant to this next conversation. We can have that conversation a different time. But for now, this has to do with a controversial GMO labeling bill, which is known as the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act, or to the detractors, the Deny Americans Right to Know Act, or the DARK Act, which would effectively nullify genetically modified organism labeling measures like the bill recently passed in Vermont, which is supposed to go into effect in July 2016. So this labeling act would create a federal voluntary standard for GMO labeling and block mandatory labeling efforts by states. So you couldn't pass a bill in your state or city, county, etc. You'd have to use the federal government standards and go through their process. The Associated Press reports that, quote, the food industry wants the labeling to be voluntary, and it hopes to get a provision in a massive spending bill that Republicans and Democrats want to wrap up this week. So that's what they try to do as well. They started calling this the Monsanto rider. They were going to include the DARK Act in there because they can't get it through on its own. And this is something else that Obama has said that he supports and they want to pass, especially when he's surrounded by tons of corporatist biotech agents within the White House and within his administration. And yeah, like I said, thankfully, fortunately, this one did not happen, but they will still try to get this through somewhere if they can't pass it on its own. And I hate to even pay attention to the government, because I believe in agorism, I believe in anti-politicking, creating your own abundance, creating the world you want to see, mocking the political system, mocking their ways of doing things as ineffective and finding more effective ways of doing things, and that's absolutely important. But at the same time, you must remain, or not even but, in addition, you must also remain aware of what your opposition is doing. I don't like to use the word enemy, but the opposition, the status. You have to be aware of what's going on in that world so that we can be educated and be a part of the conversation, have a discussion with other people, and then bring them to the radical ideas that you may believe in, or the ones that I believe in. Hopefully you're taking on some of my radical ideas. And so I try to keep aware of what the government's doing, even though I hate them and they're full of shit. And I think that the federal government in the United States is the biggest failure, and everything they do is more than likely a lie and just designed to control people, take their money, and do all kinds of different things like that. So, we just have to accept that when it comes to genetically modified foods, whether or not you think they're good or bad, when it comes to the corporatism, the United States government is definitely in bed with Monsanto, Syngenta, Dow, all these chemical companies that are making genetically modified products and that benefit from that. So that alone is corporatism, it's crony capitalism, and that's one of many reasons you shouldn't support it. I mentioned earlier the word abolitionist, and I said that I had something to share with you. I'm going to get out of here in just a moment, but before I do, I wanted to talk with you about this, my theories, my ideas on abolition. And the reason I bring up this idea, this thought process, is because, some of you may notice that recently in quote-unquote libertarian circles, there's been people who are advocating for supporting Donald Trump. And I don't really know how to put it into words, my disgust for this position or my lack of understanding. But it's not even just Donald Trump. It's the ideas like, I'm going to say it, Borders, and I hate to say it, but I don't think that Borders is a libertarian position, and I'm going to talk more about that in a second. I see people coming out of the woodwork who are expressing racism. And again, the ideas of Donald Trump are supporting him. And I'm not even talking about individuals on Facebook, and we definitely shouldn't look for leaders, but people with a larger voice, with a following, say Alex Jones, say, other less well-known, less followed people like Christopher Cantwell, the whole InfoWars crew, and even Stefan Malone and others who, to me, when you read their writing, they're just coming, like I said, they're coming out of the woodwork, they're revealing themselves as maybe people who understood the idea of liberty, but only for their own ends. And I'm sorry, you can be a libertarian and be a racist, because libertarianism just means, individual, anti-authoritarian. So as long as you're not trying to use the state or the authorities to enforce your horrible, ugly, stupid, ridiculous, childish views, then yeah, you can still call yourself a libertarian, but I wouldn't want to call you a friend. So racism really doesn't have anything to do with libertarianism in itself. Anarchy doesn't either. The sooner you start making prescriptions for what society could be like, then the second I'd say you're not really an anarchist, because anarchy, freedom, it's a dangerous, beautiful world, and it could include people who are ugly and nasty and who might want to form communities of all whites and things like that. And so in the end, I recognize that that's what freedom's about. But I guess I'm just John Vibes, and I've just been so disgusted and surprised and disappointed to see and to hear these thoughts from certain people. And maybe you are them, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. We're going to do, in fact, in the next couple of weeks, John and I are going to be doing a Google Hangout, which we'll promote and share with you guys, where we discuss this and really lay out our viewpoints. I mean, we really already did this in the Conscious Resistance Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality, my book that you can download for free. If you want to hear my thoughts on race, religion, sex, gender, all that stuff. But it's just disappointing to see this, and if this is your viewpoint, that's fine. We can still focus on common ground to a certain point, but you need to recognize the failure in giving these ideas, which again are just bad ideas, and then wanting to use the state to empower them, to keep people out because they're Muslim or because they're black or Mexican or anything stupid and just childish like that. I don't know where you get off on that thinking. And I can understand some people think they're being pragmatic because they're saying, well, statists or immigrants and refugees are going to be statists and it's going to empower the state. And I'm trying to keep myself from going too heavy into this. But let me say why I started talking about abolitionists. Basically, I've never identified as an anarcho-capitalist because I don't think that privatization is necessarily the answer to everything. I think that is the answer to a lot of things, but I think that we can't be too dogmatic and rigid in our views. We can be principled, but we can also learn from other viewpoints. This is why I read the anarcho-communists, I read the collectivist and syndicalist. I read the old American Individualist. I know that libertarianism isn't just Murray Rothbard and was around before Murray Rothbard and Hoppe and all these different people that some of these American libertarians are stuck on. And I try to take it all in and understand other people. So I think it's important for us to do that and to recognize that we have a wide variety of solutions and ideas. So that I just can't, identify with an anarcho-capitalist or with one particular label in general, but definitely I've never really liked the anarcho-capitalist label. And even whenever I used to go to, say, a Ron Paul event to support him because he had these radical ideas that I'd never heard before, I would still recognize that some of my quote-unquote allies were these Tea Party, conservative, right-wing people who definitely I got this somewhat racist, just closed-minded, viewpoint. And there's nothing wrong with being conservative, or being on the end, or being liberal. I'm friends with all kinds of people. But I got this feeling that, okay, some of these people might be right underneath the surface racist. And now I guess some of those inclinations are coming out. Now that Donald Trump's out there screaming and being a loud voice, some people feel safe to come out and express their ugliness. So because of that and several other reasons, I've never identified as an anarcho-capitalist, and John Vibes and I basically wanted to distance ourselves, and I really consider myself, the more I think about it, to be an individualist anarchist, an individualist in general. And I really like the idea of abolitionists, not only because abolitionists were abolishing slavery, but slavery still exists, and not to discount actual slavery, literally people being sold, which still happens today, but yes, it's still, that form of slavery still does exist. But also slavery to the state and to statism. And maybe you could say you're an abolitionist to abolish the state. So I don't know. What do you think about that? I really don't like wearing labels in general. If anything, I'm an agorist because I practice agorism. I'm a counter-economist. I'm a human being. I'm an individualist. These are all just different labels. And as far as abolitionist goes, I think it sounds cool, but I also don't like being against something, like I'm abolishing something. But what are you for? Don't just be against things. Be for things. So those are my thoughts on that's just my rant on the latest libertarian happenings in this quote-unquote movement, which, by the way, you can keep. I really don't want anything to do with the movement. I want to build brand new ideas, and these are my goals, and I think that's what I've become successful as, working with other people around the country who are building awareness, building solutions, and I don't want to get stuck just within one movement. And I think that's what happened with a lot of people. They felt like they found a philosophy and ideology that could work and fix everything, and they tried to cram everybody else in that. But people are diverse. We're not all going to come to the same conclusions. I think we can learn from each other, we can grow, and we can create a beautiful world. So let's do this together. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll be back next week, I promise. And if not, you can find all of my work at derrickbroze.contently.com. You can subscribe to my Patreon account, patreon.com/Derrick Broze, and get exclusive content that you see before anyone else. And you can follow us on Facebook at the Conscious Resistance Network. Thank you guys for listening. As always, if you can hear this, you are the resistance. Peace.